From May 2024 to March 2025, my life looked ordinary from the outside. I lived in a small apartment in Carytown, Richmond, close enough to walk to the coffee shop where I graded receipts and reconciled spreadsheets for the health system in Henrico. I was 27, paying my student loans on time and proud of every dollar I earned. People assume the eldest daughter becomes strong because she is born that way, but in my house, strength was not a choice. It was survival. My sister Sloane had a way of making every need sound like a crisis. In 2020, she called crying about the deposit for her apartment near Short Pump. My mother said Emily has savings. Families help each other. So the UGMA my grandmother left for me meant for emergencies, and grad school suddenly disappeared with promises that melted like sugar in rain. I asked for it back more than once, and the answer was always the same. You should be proud you could help. Meanwhile, Sloane bought new clothes, a ring light for her video job, and a couch she bragged about on Instagram. My mother, Marilyn, believed generosity was a rule the eldest girl followed without question. She repeated it like scripture. A good daughter gives, a good sister shares. If I asked why kindness only moved in one direction, she accused me of being dramatic. My father, Tom, rarely spoke. He believed silence kept the house calm. If I pushed too hard, he would say, "Let it go, Em. Peace is expensive." I never asked what peace cost him. By fall of 2023, I met Noah Bennett at a volunteer event downtown. He was patient and funny, and he listened without trying to fix me. His parents, Ian and Patricia, were the kind of people who baked bread for neighbors and never asked for favors in return. Their house felt like a place where respect lived in the walls. When Noah proposed in the spring, my family acted thrilled. Marilyn told everyone she had raised me right. Sloane hugged me with the enthusiasm of someone hugging a winning lottery ticket. I tried not to think too much about that. Everything felt stable until the day Noah's parents handed us a set of keys at the rehearsal dinner. It was a used car, clean and reliable, the exact kind of gift meant to help us start our life. Ian said, "We added your name to the title." No confusion, no drama. I thanked them until my voice shook. For once, something in my name actually stayed mine. Patricia held my hands and said, "You deserve something that cannot be taken." I did not know how badly I needed to hear that. My mother smiled through tight teeth and said, "How thoughtful." Her eyes flicked to Sloane as if calculating what she could do with keys that did not belong to her. I ignored the twist in my stomach. I wanted to believe she would behave. But patterns do not end because you hope. They end because you fight. In December, I opened the mailbox and found a plain white envelope stamped "Final Notice." Inside was a toll violation for $8.50 plus a late fee. The plate number matched Sloane's old car. I called her and she said Mom handled it. She probably added your address so you could pay online. It is easier that way. I felt heat rise in my face. They had used my address without asking. Again, I paid the toll to stop the additional late fees. 2 days later, the bank charged me $25 because the payment landed after the deadline. It was only $33 total, but the amount was never the problem. It was the principle. Every time I opened my wallet, I felt someone else's hand inside it. I decided I would not repeat that mistake. The next week, my mother texted asking for a photo of my Social Security card. She said the dentist offered a discount for families on one plan, and it would help her manage dental insurance. I said I will manage my own insurance. She replied with "You need to learn to trust." I answered trust works both ways. She did not respond. Instead, Sloane called to reminisce about the time she used to be an authorized user on my credit card. She laughed and said, "It really helped my score. Maybe we open that again." I said no. She went quiet, then snapped, "Who are you trying to impress?" I hung up. That night I made tea and sat at the dining table with my laptop. I removed every old authorized user, froze my credit reports at all 3 bureaus, and opted out of firm offers so new cards could not be opened in my name. It felt like putting locks on windows I did not know were open. Then, in a moment of silent humor, I sent my mother a link from the CFPB about protecting your identity. I added a smiling emoji because sometimes the smallest revolutions are the most satisfying. For a while, things were quiet. My parents asked about wedding colors, seating charts, flower choices. Sloan promised she would help with decor, but mostly she offered opinions and spent weekends on shopping sites. Noah watched me carefully as if sensing something under my skin. One evening, he made dinner and said, "You do not breathe when you talk about your family." I told him I was fine. He said, "You do not have to be." The closer the wedding came, the more I noticed little things. My mother using my name in conversations with vendors. Sloan asking if I would co-sign a lease for a newer car because her job might require travel. When I said absolutely not, she sighed dramatically and claimed I was becoming cold. I asked why being responsible made me cold. She said because family should not keep score. I wanted to ask why only my side of the scoreboard was ever visible. In early March, I received another letter addressed to me but meant for my mother. A bill for a family phone plan that still used my old card on automatic payment. The total was small, but the betrayal was huge. I learned that kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is surrender. Each small violation stacked on top of the next building pressure, like a pipe waiting to burst. I began writing every incident down. Dates, amounts, words, proof. It was not revenge, it was preparation. Noah noticed the notebook, and instead of asking why, he said, "Good. Keep going." His parents sent us the final documents for the car. Title, bill of sale, registration, all in my name. When I held those papers, I realized how rare it was to own something that no one else could claim. I tucked them into a folder in my desk and breathed a little easier. My mother asked if she could borrow the car for errands one weekend. She said Sloan's car might not make it to her interview. I said no. She laughed like I was joking. I was not joking, and the silence that followed was the beginning of the war she did not expect. I had been raised to give. I had never been taught how to keep something for myself. Now I was learning. And once you learn that lesson, you cannot unlearn it. On the morning of the wedding, the River Mill Event Center looked like something out of a magazine. Silk napkins, polished cutlery, the smell of champagne already chilling in crystal flutes. I woke up telling myself I would not let nerves ruin this day. Marilyn arrived early with a smile that felt too wide to be sincere. She said, "Give me the spare key and the title copies. I will keep everything together in my purse so it does not get lost." I answered, "No, I will hold my own documents." The pause that followed was sharp like a blade touching glass. She laughed softly and told the makeup artist, "Some brides are anxious about everything." I sat still while my hair was pinned, pretending I did not hear the insult tucked inside the sweetness. After the ceremony, while the photographer arranged family portraits, I checked my phone for a message from Noah. Before his text popped up, a familiar bank alert appeared instead. My card had charged another monthly payment for the family phone plan. I stood in my wedding dress on the stone path outside the venue and stared at the message. It was always the same lie. It is cheaper if it runs through you, and I will send the money back. She had never sent a single payment. It was always easier for my mother when the convenience belonged to her and the bill belonged to me. The photographer asked me to smile. I did because the camera only needs teeth, not truth. Inside the ballroom, the lights were warm and golden. The band played soft jazz and guests mingled over sliders and mini crab cakes. Noah whispered, "You look like you are trying not to fight someone." I said, "I am fine." I said it again, like I might convince myself. My mother took the microphone near the dance floor and tapped it twice. The chatter faded. She thanked everyone for coming and spoke about how proud she was of her daughters. Then she said the sentence that burned itself into the walls. "We are passing the car Noah's parents gifted to Emily so Sloan can use it. She needs something reliable for her new job." The room did not gasp, but it stiffened. Guests shifted. My Aunt Allison raised her eyebrows and sipped her wine. Sloane stepped forward in her silver dress hair curled perfectly, face glowing, as if the world had just voted her homecoming queen. She leaned into the microphone and said, "It is just a car. Emily has Noah. She has all of us. You do not need two blessings." The room exhaled one small laugh, the kind that says, "Do we agree or are we afraid to disagree?" The humiliation settled over me like dust. Noah's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He had warned me that sometimes dignity is quiet. My blood hummed in my ears. I could taste metal. For a moment, I wondered if I should pretend to be gracious, pretend to be unbothered, pretend that another thing taken from me was just generosity. Then something else vibrated in my hand, a Venmo notification from my mother to Sloane, $300. Captioned gas and insurance from Emily with a little pink heart, my own name used as a gift tag for someone else's praise. My stomach turned cold. Guests could see transactions if they followed either of them. It was public. Marilyn was using my reputation for responsibility to accessorize Sloane's image. Money I never sent. Words I never wrote. I opened the app and stared at the payment. People like my mother do not steal money. They steal credit. They steal ownership. They steal gratitude. I pressed comment and typed 3 short sentences. Not from me. Please correct this. Thank you. I posted it publicly the way she used my name publicly. Within 10 seconds, 3 family members saw it. Sloane's smile flickered. Marilyn's eyes sharpened. A cousin whispered, "Did you see that?" Another one glanced at Sloane with the expression people use when a balloon pops unexpectedly. Sloane clicked into her phone and deleted the payment caption. But on Venmo, screenshots are fast and digital footprints do not vanish just because pride demands it. The damage was done. Marilyn moved toward me with a smile stretched thin. She said, "There was no reason to embarrass Sloane." I said, "Then you should not have pretended I paid her." She lowered her voice to a warning whisper. "Do not ruin your wedding. I told her you did that for me." Noah heard every word. He stepped closer, not to shout, not to scold, but simply to take my hand. The gesture itself was a shield. Guests drifted back to small conversations, but many kept watching from the corners of their eyes. The humiliation did not come from losing a car. It came from being told in front of an entire room that my boundaries did not matter, that my marriage had not changed my role as the family wallet. My mother returned to her table as if she had won something. Sloane walked around greeting guests, lifting her chin, smiling too brightly. Every 5 minutes, someone else glanced at their phone. A quiet storm, digital, humiliating, modern, unstoppable. During the first dance, while Noah and I moved slowly under the fairy lights, I noticed whispers at the beverage table. One of my cousins showed another cousin her phone. They both looked at Sloane. Their eyes were sharp and curious. People love gossip more than music. After the dance, I stepped outside to breathe. The cool night air filled my lungs. Noah followed. He said, "We can leave. Say the word and we will go." I told him no. Leaving would give them the story. Staying would give me the stage. We returned to the ballroom. My mother pretended nothing had happened. She waved at a group of neighbors and told them what a perfect night. The band restarted and the servers carried trays of lemon bars and brownies. But that perfect night had a crack in it. The crack widened every time someone's phone lit up. I saw Sloane tug at her hair, then touch up her lipstick, then glance toward me like I was the problem. I was not the problem. I was the truth. I realized humiliation is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent and bright, displayed on a screen for anyone to witness. Sometimes it is a transaction that says, "From Emily," when Emily has given nothing. When we finally sat to cut the cake, my mother leaned close and whispered, "Smile. Everyone is watching." I looked straight at her and said, "They should." For the first time all night, her confidence faltered. It was small, a flicker, but I saw it. She was used to controlling perception. She was not used to being caught. The humiliation was supposed to be mine. Instead, it had started to shift. Not enough to call justice, not yet, but enough to promise it was coming. The wedding reception should have been a celebration, but every minute after the Venmo incident felt like a slow tightening of invisible hands around my throat. The music picked up again. Guests drifted toward the dance floor, and Marilyn acted as though the world was back in order. Sloane floated from table to table, pretending the projector photo and the Venmo comment never happened. People smiled at her because smiling is easier than honesty, but I saw the way they tilted their heads when she walked away. The cracks were spreading. I tried to focus on the cake, cutting the bouquet, toss the little rituals meant to mark a beautiful beginning. But every time I breathed, someone had something new to say. Emily is great with numbers. Let her handle it. That voice came from a family friend who had never once asked how many hours I worked to make my financial life stable. Another relative said Sloane is younger. She needs more help to get started. It surprised me how easily people justify theft when the thief looks delicate. I sat at the head table and listened to the conversations around me, each sentence, a reminder that generosity from me was expected, while generosity toward me was optional. A few women approached and said, "Your sister is lucky to have you," as if luck explained the years of borrowed money, borrowed clothes, borrowed stability. Sloane slid into the seat beside me and whispered, "Everyone knows you make more than me. Do not make this a thing." I stared at her. I said, "I am not the one making this a thing." She snapped back, "You embarrassed me." I told the truth. She stood and walked away, tossing her hair like the victim in her own story. Later that evening, my mother sat beside Noah and me, speaking in a low voice that was meant to sound reasonable. "Sloane needs something safer for her commute. The dealership said there is a lease option, but she needs a co-signer. You and Noah could help. It is a small monthly payment." I answered, "I am not co-signing anything." My mother sighed. "Families support each other." Noah calmly placed his fork down and said, "Supporting does not mean sacrificing financial responsibility." Marilyn blinked at him, surprised that someone besides me had stopped her. She turned that practiced smile on. "Noah, you are new to how we do things." He replied, "I understand perfectly." That was the moment I realized she had underestimated the Bennett family. She thought quiet meant weak. She had no idea quiet could also mean prepared. About an hour later, I overheard two cousins talking, and one of them pulled up a GoFundMe page on her phone. The photo at the top made my chest tighten. It was a picture from our engagement shoot. Noah and I standing under magnolia trees. The caption read, "Help Sloane move for her new job. Any support is appreciated." My name was not listed, but the image was mine. My approval was not asked. My privacy was not considered. I opened the page myself while pretending to adjust my dress, hundreds of dollars already raised. People writing comments like, "Your sister is such a blessing." That photo was meant to celebrate my life. Now it was being used to fund hers. My mother danced near the band, laughing loudly, a queen among loyal subjects. I watched her move through the crowd with that polished grace, and for the first time, I did not feel like her daughter. I felt like her asset. The bride and groom were supposed to make a toast, so Noah and I stood near the microphone. Before we could speak, Sloane popped up beside me and whispered, "You will not say anything about the car." I answered, "Only the truth." Her smile died. She stepped back quickly, bumping into a server who spilled water down his sleeve. She muttered something rude and stormed away, but it was too late. People saw. Her mask was cracking faster than mine ever had. After the speeches, after the cake ceremony, after every forced smile and staged photograph, I finally had a moment alone with Noah. We stood near the back of the ballroom while guests danced. He handed me his phone. "You need to see this." It was an email thread. He had borrowed my phone earlier when the Venmo message came in, and apparently another notification arrived. An email from my mother to the dealership. "Hello, can we move the plates to my younger daughter? She will be the one using the car. We want to keep it in the family." The dealership responded, "We cannot process a transfer since the title is not in her name. Driving under the wrong insured owner can create policy violation." I stared at the words. Marilyn had not just schemed. She had tried to change legal ownership behind my back. Noah said, "The reply is evidence." I forwarded it to myself before she can delete it. I felt a strange calm settle in my bones, a fragile calm that could easily shatter. Instead of shattering, I made a choice. I stepped to a quiet corner and composed a new email. I wrote to Patricia, and Ian attached the dealership correspondence and explained what happened. Then I copied Noah and my mother on the message. I ended it with one simple sentence. "To avoid any insurance issue, we will not authorize changes." Patricia responded within minutes. "Proud of you, dear. Love, Mom Bennett." When Marilyn saw her name in the CC line, she stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. She walked across the room, heels striking the floor hard, and leaned close to my shoulder. There was warning in her voice. "You did not need to drag other people into this." I stayed perfectly still. I said I did not drag anyone. "You did when you asked a dealership to move plates illegally." Her face paled. She looked around to see if anyone was watching. They were not, but she felt exposed anyway. For the first time all night, she did not have a line to fix the moment. She said, "Fine. Keep your car. You always ruin everything when you get stubborn." Then she walked away, leaving the scent of perfume and panic behind her. The band shifted into a faster song. Guests danced. But a different rhythm began pulsing through the crowd. People could feel tension even if they did not know the details. My humiliation was no longer private. Her manipulation was no longer invisible. As Noah and I slow danced, he whispered, "You are not alone anymore." I leaned my forehead against his and breathed. I was tired of being the daughter who carried everyone else's weight. Tired of pretending money and love were the same thing. Tired of being useful. The reception lights blurred and twinkled. Somewhere behind me, my mother tried to laugh, tried to smile, tried to reclaim the spotlight. But the story had already slipped out of her hands, and she could not take that back. The night before the wedding should have been quiet and simple, the kind of evening where a bride goes to bed early and dreams about a new life, but nothing with my family ever stayed simple. Noah and I had finished a late rehearsal dinner with his parents and returned to my house to grab a small overnight bag. When we pulled into the driveway, the garage light was already on. I thought maybe I left it earlier until Noah slowed the car and pointed. Sloane stood inside the garage posing with the wedding gift car like it was a photo shoot. Her friend was holding a phone snapping pictures. At first, I could not speak. She had not been invited over. She had not asked. She had simply come. When she noticed us, she tossed her hair and said, "Relax, I am just getting a cute picture to celebrate." She pressed a sticker on the back bumper that said, "Hers" in pink cursive. Noah's jaw tightened. I walked closer and saw the sticker peel had taken a thin strip of paint with it. The bumper had a faint scar of missing color. She laughed like it was funny. "It is just paint, Emily. You can fix it." The estimate later was $180. She did not apologize. She did not even look embarrassed. She just kept posing until Noah told her to leave. She rolled her eyes and climbed into her friend's car, saying, "You are so uptight." When the garage door closed, I felt something inside me snap a little. A thin thread of patience gave way. I stood there staring at the spot where her sticker had been. That car represented respect, ownership, a rare moment when something that belonged to me was not swallowed by family obligation. Seeing her treat it like a toy was more painful than the pain itself. I tried to sleep that night but kept waking up. My mind replayed the garage scene again and again. By morning, my stomach felt hollow, a pit where joy should have been. I told myself that once we got through the ceremony, everything would be fine. That was the lie I used to survive most of my life. The morning of the wedding, while I was still in my robe getting makeup done, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Another automatic withdrawal. $89.99 for a family cloud storage plan. I stared at the screen. My old card information must have still been saved somewhere. My mother used to argue that having all the family files connected made life easier. Easier for her. More expensive for me. I texted her asking why the charge was still coming to me. She replied with a cheerful tone. "Oh, I thought it was still shared. I will send you the money." She never sent the money. I stared in the mirror while the makeup artist brushed foundation across my skin. My reflection looked calm, but my chest felt tight. Every dollar was a reminder that my boundaries were invisible to the people who claimed to love me. I opened my banking app and set a chargeback review. Then I removed that old card entirely. While I worked, another door opened. My father, Tom, entered with a manila envelope in his hand. He looked uncomfortable, like someone carrying bad news he did not want to deliver. He said, "Your mother asked me to drop this off." I opened the envelope and saw a bill for $312 for a plumbing repair in their house. The invoice had a handwritten note. Emily covered. The plumber was one of my mother's friends. She had told him to write my name as the payer so it looked official. I stared at the bill and waited for my father to defend me, to say he would handle it, to acknowledge how absurd it was. He did not. He said, "Your mother thought you would not mind." I asked, "Why would I pay for plumbing repairs in a house that is not mine?" He said it was easier. The word easier struck me like an insult. Easier for whom? Easier for the person who manipulates, or easier for the person who suffers? I told him I would not pay. He seemed startled, like the idea of me refusing anything felt unnatural. He said, "Do not start the day with conflict. Let it go for the wedding." I felt the weight of those words. Let it go. The phrase my family used every time they wanted to silence me. I set the bill on the table and said, "If she wants it paid, she can pay it." He left without arguing, which somehow felt worse than anger. Anger, at least, would have meant someone cared. Silence meant I was alone. I picked up my phone and sent an email to the plumber. I wrote that I had never authorized the repair and asked him to reissue the invoice to Marilyn Rhodes. No emotion, no pleading, just a boundary stated in clear print. After that, I filed a dispute with my bank for the cloud storage charge. I felt like I was performing surgery on my own life, removing every hidden artery that fed my mother's control. The ceremony was beautiful from a distance. The flowers were perfect, the music gentle, the guests smiling. But beneath the surface, I could feel tension twisting itself into hard knots. I could feel my patience thinning with every reminder that my life had never been entirely my own. As the reception continued, I kept thinking about the garage, the paint, the sticker, the cloud plan, the plumbing bill. None of those things were accidents. They were choices. Choices to ignore me, to use me, to take from me. The feeling simmered until I realized something clearly. They believed I was still the same version of myself. The girl who paid, who stayed quiet, who smoothed everything over for the sake of peace. They did not see the woman who had stopped apologizing. When dinner plates were cleared and people began lining up for dancing, I stepped into a hallway and opened my phone. I emailed the bank confirming the chargeback. Then I forwarded the plumber's invoice to my mother with a short sentence. "The bill is not mine. Please pay the correct party." She replied with one line, "You are being petty." I answered, "I am being accurate." When I returned to the reception, Noah saw my face and understood. He asked, "Do you want to go?" I shook my head. Leaving would let them rewrite the story. Staying meant I controlled what happened next. My mother watched me from across the room. Her smile was too tight, her eyes too sharp. She knew something had changed. She could feel the shift even if she could not name it yet. That night, when the music paused and someone proposed a toast, I lifted my glass and looked at the people who had spent years treating my life like an open wallet. I realized I was no longer afraid of them. I was no longer their resource. I was my own person, and the cost of peace was no longer mine to pay. You would let it slide to keep the peace, or would you cut off the autopay like I did? There is a very specific kind of silence that only comes when you have finally reached the edge of yourself. It is not angry or loud. It is the silence of a person realizing she has nothing left to give. After the last toast, after the last forced smile, after the last relative whispered something about family harmony, I stepped away from the ballroom and found an empty hallway near the service doors. My feet ached from hours in heels, so I slipped them off and pressed my bare toes against the cool tile. The air smelled faintly of lemons from the cleaning carts and distant frosting from the dessert table. I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe, but every inhale felt like it hit a wall inside my chest. Noah found me a moment later. His tie was loosened and his eyes were steady the way they always were when the world tried to knock me off balance. He gently touched my shoulder and said, "We prepared." His voice was simple, not dramatic, not demanding, just a reminder that I was not standing there alone. I closed my eyes and let the weight of the evening settle. All the small humiliations stacked together until they felt like a crushing stone. The sticker on the bumper, the cloud charge, the Venmo lie, the plumbing invoice, the public announcement about the car. Every violation came wrapped in the language of love. That was always my mother's genius. She never took with open hands. She took softly, politely dressed it in generosity and expected applause. Noah asked, "Are you ready?" I said, "Not yet. I need a minute." My head rested against the wall and the hallway blurred. I remembered a conversation from weeks earlier, sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold. Ava, my friend, who worked as a paralegal, laid out printed documents across the table. She had listened to stories about my family for months and finally said, "The only thing that stops people like this is paperwork. You cannot argue with signatures." She drafted a declaration of gift protection, a simple document that stated any gift received in my name could not be transferred, sold, or claimed without my written consent. It included a clause that any attempt to misuse or transfer a gift would nullify future gifts from the Bennett family in perpetuity. She said the words slowly, so I would hear its power. Forever. Then we went to see a notary named Maya Ortiz on August 28, 2025. Maya wore thick glasses and a bright pink blazer. She read every line out loud, stamped the papers with a heavy seal, and said, "You are not being dramatic. You are being reasonable. Most people learn too late." Noah and I signed in blue ink while Maya watched. I remembered my hand trembling, not because I was afraid of legalities, but because preparing for protection felt like admitting betrayal was guaranteed. Later that evening, we forwarded the notarized declaration to our attorney Jordan Blake, a civil lawyer downtown. He replied within hours with a confirmation and a short explanation. Title and bill of sale are in Emily's name. Any transfer without signature is illegal. Insurance fraud could apply if someone else drives and claims ownership. If they attempt to falsely control the gift future, Bennett gifts become void. Reading those words felt like someone finally handed me armor. I printed that email and placed it in the thick envelope I carried in my clutch on the wedding night. I carried it the way someone carries oxygen. Back in the hallway, I thought about all of that. Every signature, every stamped document, every step I took to stop a lifetime of being erased. But even with legal protection in my hands, something inside me shook. I whispered, "I do not want people saying I ruined my own wedding." Noah stepped closer near enough that his voice lowered, but strong enough that I heard every word. "They embarrassed you in public. You are just correcting the record." I let those words sink in. I'd spent most of my life being told that keeping peace mattered more than being treated fairly. That silence was noble, that boundaries were selfish. But standing in that hallway with my heels dangling from one hand and the envelope in the other, I realized peace never existed. There had only been quiet control. The hallway was dim, but the small overhead lights glowed on the white envelope. I saw my name written in neat letters. Emily Rhodes. It looked like a name that belonged to someone real, someone who did not let her life be dictated by guilt and obligation. I lifted my head, inhaled deeply, and felt something shift. I was done being the daughter who absorbed the damage. When we walked back toward the ballroom, each step felt steadier. The music floated out in soft waves, people laughed, glasses clinked, and the wedding pretended to be beautiful again. But I no longer cared about pretending. Noah held the door open and said, "Whenever you are ready." I said, "I am." Inside the ballroom, the lights looked brighter, almost harsh. The guests were dancing, unaware that a quiet storm was already forming. I held the envelope tight like a shield. Every part of me felt sharpened, calm but sharp. We walked through the crowd, past the tables covered in half-eaten desserts and crumpled napkins. My mother stood near the cake table laughing with two neighbors, but her eyes flicked toward me with a quick, nervous dart. She could sense movement. People like her always can. I reached the center of the room and stopped. Noah stood beside me, firm and steady. I opened the envelope just enough to see the blue ink signatures. Not a threat, not a scene, just truth. The band softened to a near whisper. Conversations thinned. For the first time in my entire life, I felt bigger than their expectations. I felt like a woman stepping out of a shadow and letting everyone see her clearly. No more hiding. No more swallowing humiliation so everyone else could stay comfortable. Noah looked at me and nodded once. It was the smallest gesture and the greatest permission. I took another breath and prepared to speak, not as the obedient daughter, not as the useful older sister, but as a woman who had finally had enough. This was not revenge. This was truth. This was correction. This was the moment I let go of fear. When I stepped back into the ballroom, the air felt different, charged and heavy like a storm waiting for lightning. The chandeliers glittered above everyone's heads, and the polished floors reflected every confused expression. Couples paused mid-conversation forks, stopped halfway to plates, and the last notes of a jazz saxophone faded into a long, uncertain silence. I could hear my own heartbeat tapping in my ears, but my voice stayed steady. Noah moved with me toward the center of the room. He did not need to hold my hand to steady me. His presence was enough. When we reached the cake table, he placed the thick envelope onto the linen cloth, like it was evidence, not decoration. Marilyn's smile flickered. Sloane's posture stiffened, and her eyes darted toward the envelope as if it were something toxic. I took a moment to look at the guests. The people who had watched my family call humiliation generosity. The people who laughed politely when my mother announced she was taking the car. These were witnesses now. I cleared my throat and the ballroom went silent. I opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. Every signature, every notary stamp, every printed email. My voice carried clearly across the room as I read the first lines, declaring that the vehicle was a wedding gift given specifically to me, legally transferred in my name, and protected from any attempt to change ownership without my written consent. I kept reading steady and calm, explaining that any false claims or unauthorized transfers would activate a legal review and void all future Bennett gifts permanently. The word permanently echoed inside the room. A few guests sucked in a breath. Someone near the front muttered, "I knew something was fishy." When I lifted my phone and tapped the screen, the projector behind us switched from wedding photos to a security clip. The garage camera showed Sloane the night before the wedding, posing with the car, touching the bumper, pressing a sticker on the paint. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Then another clip played the IG story she posted for her private friends list, captioned, "My car soon. Manifest." A quiet wave of uncomfortable murmurs rolled across the guests. Sloane's cheeks flushed, deep red. She turned toward our mother and hissed, "I told you not to post that." The dealership emails appeared next on the projector. The printed copy sat in my hand. The salesman confirmed that transferring plates or title was not legal without the owner's signature and could invalidate insurance. I paused after reading that line and lifted my head. My mother took a step forward and forced a laugh, too loud for the circumstances. She said, "Come on, everyone. It was a joke, a family joke." No harm done. Noah's voice cut through her performance. A joke. Symbolic of what? His tone was not loud, but it was so steady that every guest heard it. The room held its breath. My mother's eyes darted around, looking for support, but the guests avoided her gaze. Polite smiles melted. The space between us felt like a courtroom with no judge needed. I looked at her, then at Sloane. I said, "Help is not theft. Love is not access. Gifts have boundaries. Titles have signatures." My words were soft but sharp enough to draw blood without raising my voice. I continued. "The car was given to me and is registered to me. Any attempt to take transfer or claim it triggers a legal review and cancels every future gift from the Bennett family. I know you understood that. You still chose to humiliate me in public." Someone in the back whispered forfeiture, and the words seemed to freeze the air. The band quieted completely. Guests turned their heads, uncomfortable but fascinated. My mother's smile collapsed into something brittle. She said, "Emily, sweetie, we did not mean anything by it. Everyone knows how close this family is." I felt something inside me click into place, a lock sliding shut. I said, "Close families respect ownership. Close families ask before taking. Close families do not lie in front of 100 people and call it love." My voice did not tremble. That was the first time in my life I spoke without apology. I held up the folder just enough for the guests to see the thick stack of proof. Then I set it back down. I did not demand anything. I did not argue. Truth did the work for me. Noah stepped closer and said, "We are done talking about the car. The matter is legally closed." Several guests nodded the kind of nod that says they are remembering every time someone told them to stay silent in their own families. Sloane's lips quivered. She pointed at me and whispered, "You are ruining everything." I answered no. "I am ending the part where you take and I stay quiet." A few women near the bar clapped once under their breath, the smallest sound of support, but it was enough. Marilyn looked around the room, realized no one was coming to rescue her, and folded her hands together in front of her. She whispered, "It was supposed to be funny. The truth is, it was supposed to be control. It just failed." I stepped back, turned toward Noah, and he extended his hand like we were the only two people in the room. Music returned in a soft, slow rhythm, guided by the band, who seemed relieved to have direction again. Guests parted as we walked toward the dance floor. It was not dramatic. It was not loud, but the shift in energy was unmistakable. People moved aside with quiet respect, leaving space around us like an aisle. Some looked at me with sympathy, some with admiration, some with the stunned silence of people who have just witnessed a clean, elegant confrontation. I reached the dance floor and took Noah's hand. He said, "I'm proud of you." I answered, "I am proud of me too." As we began to dance, the ballroom lights shimmered. The paperwork was still on the cake table, in plain view, proof that the truth did not need to scream to be heard. Guests returned to their seats, but nothing felt the same. Conversations turned into whispers. Eyes flicked toward the envelope, toward me, toward my mother, who stood frozen at the edge of the room. That was the moment I learned something important. Power did not come from volume or anger. Power came from knowing the truth, speaking it once, and letting silence do the rest. I leaned my head on Noah's shoulder and inhaled. For the first time that night, I could breathe without feeling like the air belonged to someone else. The ballroom slowly filled again with music and motion, but a new boundary had settled across the space, invisible yet unmistakable. Every witness had seen it. Every witness understood it. The scene was not messy. It was exact, and that precision was the real victory. In the days after the wedding, the fallout arrived quietly, but it arrived everywhere. It did not look like screaming or broken relationships. It looked like paperwork declined applications, awkward phone calls, and the slow collapse of a pattern that had gone unchallenged for years. 2 mornings after the reception, Sloane tried to extend the lease on her old car. She stood at the dealership counter in short pump, tapping her nails on the desk as the clerk typed. The clerk glanced at the screen, then at Sloan with an uncomfortable smile. He apologized and explained that the lease could not be renewed because her credit report showed new disputes and flagged activity connected to the Venmo issue. Someone had reported the transaction as fraudulent. Sloan turned pale. She left the dealership without speaking, but not before the clerk added a note to the system. Later that afternoon, she tried posting on Instagram, smiling beside a borrowed car, but within an hour, her follower count dropped. People had seen the projector footage. Some unfollowed quietly. Others sent messages asking why she was posing with something that was not hers. The GoFundMe page she created using my engagement photo was reported for unauthorized use of images. The hosting platform flagged it, froze the account, and notified donors that refunds would be issued. Someone screenshotted that email and forwarded it to several mutual acquaintances. It spread faster than gossip usually does. While all of that unfolded, Marilyn tried to pretend nothing had changed. She visited the church 2 days later, expecting to finalize plans for the fall charity bake sale. The committee chair met her at the entrance and explained that her duties were paused. They said there were concerns about boundaries and transparency. Marilyn tried to laugh it off, but no one laughed back. She left the church with a stiff smile and tight hands. At the same time, the dealership where my wedding car was purchased added a bright red note to their system. It read, "Do not process transfer without written consent from owner Emily Rhodes." It was simple and calm, like everything justice should be. The red note might as well have been a wall. The plumber who sent the pipe invoice called to apologize. He said he assumed that the person who hired him had the right to assign the bill. The invoice was reissued in Marilyn's name with a late fee added. She called the plumber, argued, then paid anyway. The world was rearranging itself, and all I had done was stop paying for their comfort. Tom called me next. For the first time in years, he spoke without lowering his voice or glancing over his shoulder to make sure Marilyn did not hear. He said he was sorry. He said he wished he had stood up sooner. He said he had been taught to keep peace at any cost and did not realize that silence is sometimes just another word for surrender. I listened. I did not comfort him. I did not soften the truth. I simply said, "Thank you." Then I hung up. It was the kind of conversation that felt like a chapter ending. In our house, Noah and I went through every account and closed every door that had been left open out of habit. I updated my credit freeze. I requested new card numbers. I canceled all auto pays that might have still been tied to the old family plan. I changed the locks on our garage so no one could wander in for photos. Each task felt like sweeping broken glass off the floor. It was small but necessary. It was quiet but powerful. I found myself laughing once when I removed an old shared cloud subscription. The charge had always been presented as something helpful. The cancellation notification felt like a tiny applause. A week after the wedding, I printed a single packet and mailed 2 copies, one to Marilyn, one to Sloan. The cover page read, "Accountability packet, nothing more." Inside were screenshots of every unauthorized charge, every toll notice, every Venmo caption, and every unpaid bill that had been pushed onto my shoulders. There were no insults, no emotional paragraphs, just dates, amounts, and receipts. On the last page, I included a short table labeled Boundaries and Access. It listed 4 simple rules. No using my name, no using my accounts, no taking my property, no entering my home without invitation. It ended with the words, "This is documentation, not discussion." The packet was polite the same way a courtroom is polite. When they received it, neither of them replied. They did not call, they did not argue, they did not apologize. Silence was their only defense now. The funny thing about the fallout was the way the community responded. Not loudly, just noticeably. At the next family gathering, a few of the cousins kept their distance from Marilyn and Sloan. Neighbors who once treated them like charming social butterflies now acted careful and measured, as if they finally saw the truth behind the performances. People do not forget a public exposure, not when it is clean and undeniable. Some nights, Noah and I sat on the couch with cups of tea and watched the little signs unfold. Someone removed Sloane from a group chat. Someone else ignored her request for a ride. The world around us was rebalancing 1 inch at a time. I was not gloating. There was no thrill in watching someone sink under the weight of their own choices. What satisfied me was the quiet, the absence of demands, the absence of guilt dressed as obligation, the absence of bills that were not mine. For the first time in a long time, my bank app was empty of surprises. Every transaction belonged to me. Every charge was mine to own. Every dollar stayed where I put it. One evening, as the sun was setting over the James River, Noah looked at me and said, "Does it feel lighter?" I said, "It feels real." That night, I slept without clenching my jaw. The house was peaceful. The accounts were closed to every hand but ours. And every boundary that had been dismissed for years was now written, stamped, and enforced without raising a voice. Justice was not loud. It was tidy and exact. And for the first time, I understood that I had not ruined anything. I had repaired my life. By December, the air in Richmond carried that sharp winter scent of pine and chimney smoke. Christmas lights wrapped around porches in Carytown, and every grocery aisle smelled like cinnamon. Life in our house was calm. Quiet mornings with coffee bills paid on time, no unexpected notifications on my bank app. Peace. Real peace. It had been months since I heard from Marilyn or Sloane. They wanted silence when the world embarrassed them, and I was happy to give them exactly what they had earned. On December 20th at 8:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Marilyn lit up the screen. It read, "Sloane needs the car to get to a job interview in Short Pump. She has no one else to help. Please let her borrow it." She added a little Christmas tree emoji at the end, as if decorations softened the request. I stared at the message for a moment. There was a time when guilt would have rushed in immediately and taken control. That reflex was gone. I typed slowly and clearly. I am not lending the car. If Sloane needs transportation, Noah or I can drive her. Any help must be scheduled in writing. She may not post photos or captions that imply ownership or payment from me. I pressed send. The message felt like a steel beam. Within seconds, the typing bubble appeared. Marilyn replied, "Emily, this is family. Why are you being so cold? It is Christmas." I answered, "Being family means respecting boundaries. My decision is final." Hours passed. That evening, while Noah and I watched a Christmas movie, someone knocked on our door. When I opened it, Sloane stood on the porch wrapped in a coat too thin for the temperature mascara, smudged eyes red from crying. The porch light hit her face, and for a moment she looked like the little sister I used to protect. She spoke in a tiny voice. "Emily, please. The job interview is at 7 tomorrow morning. It pays well. I cannot lose this chance. Just co-sign for 12 months. Then she forced a weak laugh and said, "You know I will get approved if you sign. You have always saved me." She tried to step inside, but I stood in the doorway. I said, "I am not signing anything." She wiped her face and raised her voice. "Why are you doing this to me? You have everything. You have a husband, you have a house, you have a car. Just help me like you used to." I took a deep breath and stepped back into the living room long enough to grab a single sheet of paper from a file on the desk. When I returned, I handed it to her. The top of the page read, "Checklist for respect." Her eyes scanned the page. It was short, clear. No accusations, no emotions. Line 1. A public apology on social media acknowledging that the car and garage photos were taken without permission and were misleading. Line 2. A symbolic repayment of $50 per month for 24 months for the UGMA withdrawal and the paint damage. Line 3. No requests for passwords or documents. Line 4. Do not enter my home without invitation. Beneath the list was a signature line and space for the date. I said, "If you sign this, I will drive you to the interview. I will not co-sign anything, but I will help in a way that respects both of us." She stared at the paper as if it were written in another language. Her voice cracked. "You want me to humiliate myself online?" I said, "You humiliated yourself when you pretended my property was yours. This is correction, not punishment." She shoved the paper back at me. "I will not sign anything. You think you are better than us? You just want to make a show." I shook my head. "I do not want a show. I want boundaries." Without another word, I opened the front door wider. The cold air rushed in. She hesitated as if waiting for me to change my mind. I did not. Eventually, she stepped out onto the porch and walked away. She never looked back. When I closed the door, Noah asked, "Did you expect her to sign?" I said no, but I needed her to see the terms. Sometimes the offer is the lesson. The next day, we woke to soft light on the windows and the hum of the heater. I made breakfast and checked my phone. There it was, a Facebook post from Marilyn, the kind written with trembling fingers and dramatic punctuation. She wrote, "Our family is torn apart because of paperwork. Christmas is ruined. Some people value documents more than blood." The comments came quickly. Polite pity from church friends, a few distant relatives offering prayers, and then silence. They noticed what she did not say. She never explained what the paperwork was. She never explained why it existed. That silence spoke louder than anything she typed. I did not reply publicly. I did not defend myself. Instead, I forwarded a short email. It contained a gentle cease and desist template that Ava had given me months before. I addressed it to Marilyn. The subject line read, "Concerning defamatory social media posts." The tone was firm but not hostile. It stated that further misleading posts would be forwarded to legal counsel. At the end, I added CC Jordan Blake. That was all. Less than an hour later, the Facebook post disappeared. Marilyn did not apologize. She did not explain. She simply erased it and pretended it never happened. That was her greatest fear. Not consequences, witnesses. The rest of Christmas was peaceful. Noah and I cooked a small dinner together. We watched the tree lights blink softly across the living room. Outside, the world was quiet under a thin layer of frost. No one called, no one texted, no one asked for money or keys or signatures. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Family could look warm and close from the outside. It could also take everything you owned and call it love. The next morning, while I made coffee, I looked at the checklist for respect still sitting on the counter. 4 simple rules. 4 lines that could have repaired years of damage. They refused to sign because signing meant admitting the truth. And the truth for people like them is always the most expensive thing they will ever pay. If it were you, would you sign the checklist for respect or walk away like Sloan did? January arrived with a kind of clean cold that made the James River look like steel under the winter sun. Richmond moved slowly after the holidays, and I realized something strange. I woke up every morning without dread. My phone did not light up with sudden charges or family emergencies that somehow required my credit card. My emails did not ask for money or rides or explanations. Silence is a language you learn only when the noise stops. In the weeks after Christmas, the consequences for Marilyn and Sloan began to appear in small but undeniable waves. It started with the local yard sale group in our neighborhood, the same Facebook group where people traded furniture, baby clothes, and lawn equipment. Sloan tried to sell a designer purse claiming it was a limited edition gift that did not fit her style. Someone commented, "Is this the same girl who posted a car that was not hers and got called out on Venmo?" Another person replied, "Better ask the original owner before buying." Within an hour, the group admin removed Sloan completely and made a public announcement about respecting ownership and not misrepresenting items. No names were mentioned, but everyone understood. It was the kind of quiet justice that slides under a door. At church, where Marilyn had performed on committees, handed out programs, and given speeches about community values, something shifted. The bulletin one Sunday included a short paragraph about respecting boundaries, honoring property, and not taking advantage of family. It was written vaguely, but the older women in the congregation whispered before service and glanced toward my mother. She lost her position organizing charity drives for a while. She said it was temporary. Everyone knew it was not. Meanwhile, Sloan tried to control the narrative on social media. She posted a photo of herself at a bus stop with the caption, "Choosing green transportation because the planet matters." It might have worked if her followers had not already seen the garage photos and the Venmo breakdown months earlier. Under the picture, someone commented, "Whose bus?" Another person wrote, "Still think the car was yours." Within minutes, the comment section turned into a quiet field of questions she refused to answer. She turned off comments entirely. That silence was louder than any apology. The consequences did not stop with embarrassment. There were bills, real American bills that show up whether you are ready or not. Without the vehicle, she had bragged about Sloan missed 2 job interviews. One was in Short Pump and the other near Midlothian. She tried using Uber, but the prices surged. Then she overdrew her account and ended up with late fees piling like a small avalanche. I heard most of this from cousins who loved gossip more than loyalty. I did not have to raise a finger. Every pattern she used against me for years was turning on her not through revenge, but simple reality. Insurance for a car, she did not own credit cards. She could not pay a reputation she damaged herself. Marilyn tried to keep everything quiet, but she underestimated how fast stories spread in suburban circles. One afternoon, she called to say she was mailing a check to reimburse the water pipe repair that her technician had incorrectly written under my name. Her voice was flat, no anger, no apology, just a tired acknowledgement that continuing to fight would make her look worse. She even asked if I preferred Zelle or a mailed check. I asked for a check because paper leaves a trail. Slowly, all the little debts she had tossed onto my name disappeared. Cloud storage fees, random subscriptions, forgotten auto pays, even a $50 dental copay from months before. She paid them not because she wanted to, but because she knew I would dispute every unauthorized charge. When people used to talk about justice, I always assumed it meant loud courtroom victories and dramatic speeches. Now I realize the quiet version is far more powerful. It is the sound of doors closing one by one until there is no way back in. During those months, Noah and I settled into a rhythm that felt real and solid. We cooked dinner together most nights. The kitchen always smelled like garlic and bread and something warm in the oven. The dishwasher hummed after we finished eating. Sometimes we sat on the small back porch, wrapped in blankets, listening to the river wind through the night. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just a life without extraction. We created tiny rituals, fresh flowers on Sundays, a clean car every 2 weeks, lists on the refrigerator for groceries, bills, and projects. On the side of the fridge, Noah taped a small piece of paper we wrote together. Help does not mean access. Love does not mean control. Every morning I saw those words when I made coffee. They were not angry. They were honest. People talk about revenge like it is a fire or an explosion. Sometimes it is paperwork. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is refusing to fix problems you did not create. That was my version of justice. One night in February, we drove the car down Monument Avenue. The street was quiet, lined with historic homes and old trees that looked like black silhouettes in the winter light. I rested my hand on the dashboard and felt the hum beneath my palm. This was the car they tried to steal in front of everyone, the same car they posed with like a trophy. Now it was only ours. No noise, no claims, no manipulation. When the light turned green, Noah said, "Do you ever wish you had handled it differently?" I said I used to wish they would change. Now I only wish I had set boundaries sooner. That is the thing about toxic families. They do not stop until you stop them. Back home, we put leftovers in containers and started the dishwasher. The tiny domestic sounds felt like freedom. I was not waiting for another blow. I was not checking my bank account every hour. Life was small but clean. Before bed, I checked the fridge again. The list of boundaries was still there, a tiny contract with myself. It was proof that you can love people and still close the door. You can be kind without being used. You can forgive without letting them back in. I brushed my teeth and turned off the lights. The house settled around us like a warm blanket. Out in the driveway, the car sat exactly where it belonged. In the morning, I would drive it to work, pay my own bills, live my own life, and never again apologize for protecting what was mine. By March, the cold began to lift, and Richmond smelled like rain and early magnolia. Life settled into something steady and ordinary the way it should have always been. One morning before work, I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop and wrote the final email to my family. The subject line read, "Boundaries and Communication." The message was calm and polite. I explained that if they needed to contact me, it would be through email and scheduled visits only. There would be no surprise stops, no access to my home, no requests for money, documents, or transportation. I ended with one simple sentence. There is no shared property between us. Everything I own belongs to me. Thank you for respecting this. I read it twice to be sure the tone held no anger, only clarity. Then I clicked send. I did not feel the rush of victory or the sting of guilt. Just a quiet click and the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background. Noah came into the kitchen with his tie half knotted and kissed the top of my head. He asked, "Did you finish?" I nodded. "It is done." He smiled, grabbed the car keys, and we stepped outside. The afternoon sun spilled over Monument Avenue, turning the brick houses gold. Birds hopped across the sidewalks and children rode bicycles under the trees. I slid into the passenger seat. The same car they tried to take. The same car they posed with for photos. The same car they thought would fold me back into their control. Now it was just the car that carried me where I chose to go. Noah started the engine, and soft music filled the air. The kind of music that makes you breathe slower. We drove past the places that used to twist my stomach into knots. The grocery store where Marilyn once met me in the parking lot and demanded I pay the family cell phone plan. The street where Sloan took photos with my dresses and captioned them as gifts from her loyal sister. The courthouse where my loan documents lived in dusty archives and my UGMA account disappeared without a trace. But today, those places meant nothing. They were just pieces of the city like any other. As we reached the river, I rolled down the window. The breeze carried the scent of water and paving stones warmed by the sun. I rested my hand on the dashboard and closed my eyes. It amazed me how peace feels when you finally stop waiting for the other shoe to fall. Freedom is not fireworks or confetti. It is not a dramatic speech or a slammed door. Freedom is a quiet morning when your phone does not ring. It is checking your bank account and seeing nothing missing. It is knowing every lock on your house belongs to you. When we got home, I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of iced tea. The refrigerator hummed softly, its door covered in magnets shaped like tiny houses and riverboats. But there was only one picture, just one. A simple photo of the envelope Noah placed on the wedding table the night everything cracked open. No angry faces, no dramatic gestures, just paper and truth. People think families break because of pride or money or resentment. Sometimes they break because one person finally says no. That night, I stood in front of the fridge and whispered a thank you to the woman I used to be. The version of me who kept giving until her hands shook. The girl who said yes because she thought love was measured in sacrifice. And the woman who finally learned that love without respect is just a different word for taking. Later, we sat on the porch as the sky turned the color of ripe peaches. Noah rested his arm around my shoulder while cicadas hummed in the trees. He asked, "Do you think they will reach out again?" I said, "Maybe they will, or maybe they will not. Either way, I will be fine." The truth was simple. I no longer needed their apology to have peace. I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. The world did not end when I protected myself. It opened. That week, I baked bread for the first time in months. I planted herbs on the windowsill. I took long walks through Carytown and bought a bright green raincoat just because I liked it. I used to think life was supposed to be dramatic to feel meaningful, but the quiet began to feel like a luxury. Some Saturday mornings, we drove nowhere in particular. Just the two of us, coffee in hand, the car humming beneath us. Every mile felt like distance from the version of my life where I apologized for breathing. And sometimes, at a red light, Noah would glance at me and smile in that way that made my heart feel steady. He did not need grand gestures or perfect words. He just showed up every day with kindness. That was love. In April, my phone buzzed. A single email from Marilyn. It said, "We received your message. We will respect your request. No apology, no excuses. Just a line of quiet surrender." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I closed the email and deleted every thread before it. You cannot heal if you keep rereading the wound. That evening, I cooked dinner and set 2 plates on the table. The windows were open and the river breeze carried laughter from a house down the street. I felt a calm I had never known. When we finished eating, I placed the leftovers in containers and leaned against the counter. I realized I was not afraid anymore. Not of guilt, not of judgment, not of the silence. The silence was mine now. Before going to bed, I walked to the refrigerator again. The photo of the envelope still sat beneath a tiny magnet shaped like the Virginia state line. I touched the corner of the picture and whispered, "Truth kept." That was all it ever needed. No audience, no applause, just a quiet promise to myself that I would never trade freedom for approval again. The world outside dimmed as the porch light clicked on. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked and a screen door creaked shut. The simplest sounds of a life lived on my own terms. When I finally turned off the kitchen lights, I felt the weight of the old years slide off my shoulders. We went upstairs. No drama, no fear, just the soft rustle of sheets and the steady rhythm of Noah breathing beside me. Tomorrow would be an ordinary day, and that felt like a miracle. You do not need a castle or a courtroom to win. Sometimes victory is a locked front door, a full gas tank, a clean bank account, and a heart that no longer flinches. That is what I earned. That is what I protected. And that is what I kept. If you have a no that saved you, tell it in 1 sentence below. Someone out there needs to hear you.